Breaking new ground as the inaugural champion of women's and girls cricket, Metrobank have teamed up with the ECB to introduce the Metrobank Girls in Cricket Fund. Cricket empowers women and girls, fostering confidence and lifelong skills. Through the Girls in Cricket Fund, Metrobank strives to provide more opportunities for female cricketers to thrive within their communities and emerge as inspiring role models. Through creating supportive and inclusive spaces and breaking down barriers, this fund will empower women in cricket. Get involved at metrobankonline.co.uk/cricket and champion the future of girls cricket. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly Podcast. England are 3-0 up with 2 to play in the T20s against New Zealand. We'll be talking about that series and where England are, as well as wondering what the future of Test cricket in the women's game holds. Should it be viewed as the pinnacle? Should teams be striving to play more of it? I'm Yas Rana, and with me, as ever, is Lauren Winfield-Hill. Lauren, England have been dominant again against New Zealand, but last night's game was probably the closest yet. England getting over the line in the final over. Alice Capsey hitting an unbeaten 67 from number 3 to guide England home. That's probably Capsey's most mature performance yet for England. It's easy to forget she's still only 19. That was her 49th game for England, even though she's still only 19.
Yeah, she's still a baby. But yeah, what a knock it was last night. I think I was speaking to her a little bit before the game, and she seems in a really good place. She seems like she's sort of almost got a mojo back a little bit. I think it's so easily to forget how she's sort of just thrust into international cricket, franchise cricket, you know, almost become a bit of a global name overnight. And it sort of all came really thick and fast for her. And it obviously, you know, the rise was pretty quick. And then she had this little wobble over the last year or so, I guess. But she's had a bit of a break at the start of this summer, and she seems to be, yeah, she certainly, you can always tell from Capsey, from her body language, from, you know, shot selection, and almost a bit of confidence and swagger out there as to where she's at. But it was a crucial knock. I think, you know, she almost guided the ship from number 3. She chose some really key moments of when to attack, like the timing. You know, I was speaking on air a little bit last night, the timing of that 6 she hit off Amelia Kerr. You know, that's really selective. That's really wise before her years, and tactical in terms of wickets falling around you, choosing your moment of when to throw that punch. Yeah, it was an awesome knock, and there could have been little wobbles in there if she'd have got out, sort of got 50 and got out, and actually, you know, the run rate was sort of creeping 7s to 8s, and you've got 2 fresh batters at either end. It could have quite easily been a different story for England.
When she's playing at her best, what do you think she does slightly differently? As you say, she had a quiet period. We know how talented she is. What is it that we see when she gets things right?
She goes early. She makes moves early. I think she goes to her strengths. She relocates. She uses her feet to the bowlers. She'll pull out her tools before she's under pressure. What I sort of see is like timing of boundaries. So she'll go early in the over, rather than, you know, what we've maybe seen a little bit is she's become under pressure and then tried to go to her sort of boundary options. And it's like anything, isn't it? You know, if you're trying to do it under pressure, the chances of execution come down. Whereas when you're making the move and you're dictating and dominating a little bit more, then your chances of execution obviously go up, because it's almost like you're taking command. And she did that. She did that from pretty much ball 1. I think she likes number 3 as well. I think that suits her game. She spoke a little bit after, you know, in a player of the match press at the end, how she knows her game at number 3. She feels like she gets the best of both worlds, whereby she's sometimes in the power play, but she gets that sort of middle to end phase of the game as well. So yeah, I think there's some really good signs there. I think she's sort of grown as the summer's gone on. I thought she played really nicely in that last ODI at Bristol. She got 35 off 31, and again, like, you know, it's not a massive contribution runs wise, but just the manner and being not out, I think she took a lot of confidence from.
Well, it'll be fun to see how she goes under your captaincy. The 100 doesn't start. It's not too far away. I think it's only 11 days away from the first game. In the bowling department, England have mixed things around a little bit. In that first game, they went extremely spin heavy with Lindsay Smith coming into the side. effectively for Lauren Bell. So you had Smith, Eccleston, Glenn and Dean. It's not impossible that that's actually the balance that England go for in the World Cup that's in Bangladesh.
Yeah, no, there's a huge possibility. Yeah, I mean, there's not many worlds where Lindsay Smith is like for Lauren Bell, but I think what England are trying to do is they're sort of trying to future-proof their World Cup campaign. You know, Nat Sciver-Brunt spoke a little bit yesterday pre-match about doing a lot of what-if planning, a lot of almost like chaos training. So, like, for example, yesterday, Louis wasn't the head coach. Alex Gidman was head coach. Obviously, Nat Sciver-Brunt was captain. Heather didn't play. Sophia Dunkley comes in for Danny White, and it's future-proofing the what-ifs for the World Cup. So, you know, we know that there's a high chance they're going to play 3 or 4 spinners in those conditions. The other thing is, you know, like touring somewhere like Bangladesh, you get illness, you get injuries, you know, those sorts of things play a part. If Heather goes down, it's okay. We got this. If Danny White goes down, who's probably your first name on the team sheet in T20 cricket, it's fine. You know, we've practiced this. We're sort of bulletproof with what could go wrong. And I honestly think it's just an awesome call from Louis, the sports psych, you know, Heather to do that sort of stuff. I think it's something that we did a little bit in 2017 of what if planning, and it's very easy to just constantly practice your best case scenarios. And I think it's a really awesome move from England, and using it as a way to create pressure in a series that hasn't created a lot of pressure. You know, we all know, like, human nature is like, we want to know what's coming. We want the knowns. Whereas actually, you know, the unknowns and change create pressure. And that's, yeah, I think it was really cool to hear about some of the stuff that they're doing ahead of the World Cup and how they're trying to create that chaos for the girls.
No, that's really interesting. How important is the other 19-year-old in the team, Freya Kemp? She applied the flourish with the bat yesterday, but if England go down that spin-heavy way, her being able to provide overs from maybe even number 5, number 6, completely changes what is possible in terms of how you can compose that team.
Oh, she's an unbelievable talent, Freya Kemp. Like, she's just a gun athlete. She's got a great, she's got a great temperament, work ethic, attitude as a young player. But she's like, for me, she is so exciting because she does everything. You wouldn't be upset if she was batting 5. You wouldn't be upset if she was opening the bowling, and she's in your gun fielding spots. She's a great package for England. If you think, you know, if you're trying to get 4 spinners in Bangladesh, and you've got Freya Kemp and Nat Sciver-Brunt who are could bat in the top 6 and could also take the new ball, you know, you're in a pretty blessed position balance wise of the team. She had a tough night with the ball last night, really. I think, you know, the New Zealand girls played her well, to be fair, and sort of seemed to be the one that they went after. But what I loved was how she came back on and used her change-ups. I think she got a back of the hand slower ball slightly wrong, and Sophie Devine hit her out the ground. And then, you know, a couple of balls later, she comes back and she drives a Yorker in and gets a reward. And I think, you know, that's like, it's great signs to see someone that maybe the first spell hasn't gone particularly well, but sort of comes back and has the confidence to still go to change ups under pressure. I think the other thing is as well is like that knock shouldn't be understated. You know, if you get 6 off 8, England could wobble big time and actually lose the game. Whereas 16 off 8 balls, 200 strike rate, you know, jobs are good and thank you very much. You know, you don't pull out that score necessarily from a scorecard and think, wow, that was a game-changing innings. But in the context of the game, and as the game unfolded, you know, it's pretty obvious to see that was a huge knock.
No, definitely took the sting out of the run chase for sure. So a week or so ago, we saw India take on South Africa in a test in Chennai. India won it by 10 wickets. Sneh Rana took 10 in the game, including her first innings 8 for Shafali Verma hit her first innings double 100. She put on 250 odd with Mandana up top. Mandana hit 149. There were second innings hundreds for Sune Luce and Laura Wolfart. But it's an interesting time to talk about where Test cricket is placed in the women's game, because at the moment there isn't any more Test cricket scheduled until the Ashes Test match in early 2025. England are not playing a Test match this home summer. And a bit of context, so between 2014 and 2021, only England and Australia played Test cricket. Since then, India and South Africa have played a handful of games each. No one outside those 4 teams have played a test match since the Netherlands played South Africa 17 years ago. What do you think of its place in the women's game? I always felt slightly uncomfortable about in the multi-format Ashes series that it's so prominent, given that the 2 teams don't play it really in between Ashes series.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I think it's one of those things where it's so heavily weighted in the context of that series, yet it's the format that it's sort of a bit of hit and hope because you don't play it very often. I don't think anybody's overly good at Test cricket apart from Tammy Beaumont and Heather Knight, Elise Perry. And that's 3 players out of 2 sides that you think, yeah, you know what, they're pretty good at Test cricket. Everybody else is just sort of trying to prepare as best they can and go in with what they've got, which, for something that's so heavily weighted. And we've seen times, where the points scored in the test match almost makes the white ball series nearly irrelevant because it's so difficult in that Ashes series to come back from a test match defeat. I think women's cricket's got to decide whether are we dipping our toes in and we're going to do this sort of half-assed, or are we going all in? And I think India probably hold a big power with that. They seem to quite like Test cricket. They seem to be pretty good with it. We know that the power that they possess in the global game. And you speak to the players and they're keen for it. They really want to play more Test cricket. But it's almost like it needs to be backed from the powers above, as we're either going all in for this or we're all out. And at the minute, it's sort of in this murky area where we'll just throw it in here and there and see how it goes down. But it's not something that's taken hugely seriously across all teams and all series. I think one of the way, you almost need the top 5 or, 4 or 5 teams to commit to a test match a year minimum. And tag it onto, you could use this, for example. We were talking yesterday on air, Susie Bates has scored 10,000 international runs. Not one of them has been in Test cricket. And a nation like New Zealand, you probably need to get them on board, in terms of use this series, for example. I know you're going into a World Cup, so you obviously want to play more T20s, but you could almost have it like an Ashes where it's 350 overs, 3 T20s and a test at the end or a test at the start, whatever. Yeah, it's just too dipping your toes in for me. Is you either go all in or you go all out, really. And you're almost not teeing them up for failure, but it's how are you supposed to be good when you just don't do it very often?
I guess that's the other part of it as well. It's not just playing more Test cricket, it's providing a structure around it so that the players, when they do play Test cricket, are as close as to their ultimate potential as they can be. You see in Test matches when they are played, for example, this week, India were in the field for something like 160 overs. If their players are predominantly playing 20 over and 50 over cricket, it's unreasonable to expect them to perform at the highest level over 160, because that's just something they literally don't train for. You mentioned India's desire to play more. Harmanpreet Kaur is probably one of the biggest advocates for playing more Test cricket, but you get mixed views, I think, from across the board. So the ICC chair, Greg Barkley, in an interview a couple of years ago, he said, in order to play Test cricket, you have to have the structures in place domestically, and they don't exist. So I can't really see women's Test cricket evolving at any speed. That's not to say they can't choose to play Test cricket, but I don't really see that as part of the landscape moving forward to any real extent. There was one Test match a couple of years ago where I got the sense that the captain of one of the 2 teams didn't massively love Test cricket. She admitted that it wasn't something that she followed necessarily, so found it difficult applying the right tactics, I guess, that you need in a close Test match. Do you think there are some players who, because 95% of the time is devoted to white ball cricket, would actually be pretty happy if we just prioritised white ball cricket and viewed that as the pinnacle in a way that's different to the men's game?
Oh, I think white ball cricket is probably the pinnacle in women's cricket, just on the premise that you're playing World Cups, and that's always going to be at this stage. It's always going to be more of a priority than Test cricket. It would be stupid, really, for a female to view Test cricket as the pinnacle when you might play it once every 3 years. So you're not reaching your pinnacle very often, are you? There may be some girls who aren't overly keen for it, but if you did more of it, you'd feel more comfortable and confident that you would enjoy. You're going in with the armory. Whereas at the minute, people maybe who are against it or not overly keen for it are probably the ones that find it hard because they don't do it very often and they don't feel overly prepared. So I think that's a big part of it. In terms of like, when you're saying about the ICC saying that there's not really a future in it because the domestic structures don't provide that underneath. Well, there's still been a fair few without that. The Ashes has had a has had test cricket for. There's never been a domestic multi-day, format in England. Yet we still play a test match in the Ashes. Same as South Africa, same as India. So I don't think that has to be in place. It's almost like you either got to commit to it, and it's up to the individual countries then as to whether they want to put that into their domestic games or whether they don't view that as a huge priority. It's no different to if you've got a T20 World Cup coming up, then you do more T20. And that's how you shape your domestic structure around what global events are coming up. So I think the onus is still on the individual countries and how they want to go about that. The ICC will have to either put it in or they don't, and how individual countries deal with that is up to them.
How did you find preparation for tests when you played?
Yeah, it was difficult because it felt like it was completely different to anything any way that you prepare in white ball stuff, and flicking, almost flicking from one format to the other when it's not something that you do overly frequently is difficult. It's, the hardest bit is like the tempo of batting. You play white ball cricket and you sort of have a look for 1 or 2 overs and then okay, how do I apply some pressure? Whereas, in test cricket, you're like, oh, you're sort of caught between these two mindsets. Do I, don't I? And it seems like it's always one of those things where you sort of do nothing for 10 months and then you're like, right, we've got 2 weeks. And I know for the Ashes, we do like 2 days red ball practice. Then we'd go, right, we're going to do a T20 practice tomorrow. And then you sort of come back in and do a bit more red ball and then a bit of white ball. But it's one of those things where you don't do anything. And then all of a sudden you've got a red ball going around corners and you've got a couple of days on the trot, and next minute you're thrust into a test match.
Well, England at the moment aren't scheduled to play another test match until the Ashes test match in early 2025. The schedule's slightly different this time round, in that the test match comes at the end of the tour rather than at the beginning as it was in 2023. So yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to keep an eye on how England prepare. I mean, if England are doing all this chaos training for the T20 World Cup, I'm pretty sure they'll prepare well for the Ashes test down under. Anyway, that's everything for today's show. Cheers for your time, Lauren. Catch you next week.
Thank you.
And remember that in partnership with the ECB, the Metrobank Girls in Cricket Fund strives to increase the number of girls cricket teams threefold by the end of 2026. By fostering supportive and inclusive environments for both cricket coaches and players, this initiative seeks to remove obstacles and create more confident women. Join the movement and champion the future of girls cricket.